5 shocking secrets about Napoleon you've never heard before. You've heard the legends. You've seen the portraits. But what if I told you that the real Napoleon Bonaparte was far stranger, more human, and more surprising than anything you've ever learned in school? He wasn't short. That was British propaganda. He wrote a romantic novella, yes, Napoleon. The man who shook Europe once poured his heart into a love story. He feared cats. He was chased off a battlefield by rabbits. And one night, in the silence of defeat, he tried to end his own life. Welcome to Napoleon Footsteps, the channel where we go beyond the battles, beyond the crowns and cannons, to uncover the hidden world of one of history's most misunderstood figures. In today's episode, we're diving into 5 things you didn't know about Napoleon. These are not your textbook facts. These are secrets, quirks, and forgotten moments that reveal a very different side of the man who crowned himself emperor. So stay with us until the very end, because secret number 5 is something historians still debate today, and it just might change the way you see Napoleon forever. Grab your coffee, sit back, and let's peel back the curtain on the legend of Napoleon Bonaparte. 1. Napoleon wasn't short, the great British lie. You've heard it 100 times, Napoleon was short. In fact, his very name has become synonymous with the so-called Napoleon complex. The idea that short men overcompensate with power, ambition, and aggression. But what if I told you that's not true? Napoleon Bonaparte was not short at all. In fact, by the standards of his time, he was perfectly average. Let's break this myth wide open. Historical records list Napoleon's height at 5 feet 2 inches, but here's the twist: that's French feet, not British or American feet. In the French measurement system of the 18th century, 5 feet 2 inches actually translates to around 1.68 to 1.70 meters. Or about 5 feet 6 to 5 feet 7 inches by today's standard. And guess what? That was the average height for a French man in the early 1800s. So where did this myth come from? The answer: propaganda. Specifically, British propaganda. At the height of his power, Napoleon was the most feared man in Europe. Britain, his chief rival, couldn't defeat him on the battlefield for years. So they fought him with words and images. British cartoonists began exaggerating Napoleon's appearance in caricatures. They portrayed him as tiny, hot-headed, and ridiculous, a comic figure rather than a fearsome leader. They hijacked the nickname, the Little Corporal, originally a term of endearment used by Napoleon's own soldiers, and twisted it into a form of mockery. And it worked. The image stuck. For generations, schoolchildren were taught to think of Napoleon as a short, angry man obsessed with power. But the truth? He wasn't short. He was strategically brilliant, and the myth only shows how far his enemies had to go to try and bring him down. Think about it. Would a truly small, unimposing man be able to inspire men to follow him through fire, snow, and cannon fire, across half of Europe? Eyewitnesses describe Napoleon as commanding, charismatic, and deeply intense. He didn't need height to dominate a room, he had presence. So the next time you hear someone call Napoleon the little guy with a big ego, you'll know, it wasn't about height. It was about power. And the fear that power inspired. And if this lie about his height has lasted for over 200 years, you have to wonder, what other secrets are hiding beneath the surface? Stick with us, because the next story involves a side of Napoleon you've never imagined. A secret love story, written by the emperor himself. 2. Napoleon the Romantic Novelist, a love story from the battlefield. Before he was an emperor, before he reshaped Europe with fire and steel. Napoleon Bonaparte wrote a love story. Yes, you heard that right. Long before the cannons of Austerlitz and the coronation at Notre Dame, young Napoleon had a passion for literature. As a teenager stationed in Valence, far from the glitter of Paris or the roar of war, he found himself immersed in books, particularly the works of Rousseau and Goethe. And from that quiet corner of his military barracks, he penned a novella titled Clisson et Eugenie. This short romantic tale is almost unknown to the world, but it reveals a strikingly different Napoleon, vulnerable, idealistic, and heartbreakingly human. The story centers on Clisson, a brave and noble soldier who falls deeply in love with a woman named Eugenie. After a whirlwind romance, he is called away to war. While he's away, Eugenie betrays him. Disillusioned and broken, Clisson walks away from love, and from life itself. Sound familiar? Historians believe the story was deeply autobiographical. Napoleon had just experienced his own heartbreak with a woman named Desiree Clary, his fiancée, who would later marry someone else. The novella became an outlet for his pain, a window into the emotional turmoil behind the rising general. But what's even more fascinating is the style. It's not the writing of a cold strategist. It's poetic, passionate, even a bit melodramatic. It shows that Napoleon wasn't just a man of war, he was a man of feeling, torn between duty and desire. He never published the work during his lifetime. In fact, it wasn't discovered until long after his death. Found among his personal papers and eventually published in fragments. Today, it remains a historical curiosity. An unfinished novel by one of history's most famous conquerors. But more than that, it offers something rare, a glimpse of Napoleon's soul. Behind the uniforms, the campaigns, and the imperial ambition was a man who once wrote, "Love is the occupation of the idle man, the distraction of the warrior, and the ruin of the sovereign." It's a haunting line, and perhaps, a prophecy. Because for Napoleon, love was never simple. His relationship with Josephine, his political marriage to Marie-Louise, even his longing for a lasting dynasty, all were marked by emotional complexity, loss, and longing. So next time you picture Napoleon, don't just imagine the general on horseback. Picture the young man, alone at a desk, writing about a broken heart, long before the world knew his name. And trust me, the next secret in this list will take an even stranger turn. Because Napoleon's next great challenge wasn't on the battlefield. It involved a furry, fluffy army that no one saw coming. 3. The Emperor vs. the Bunnies, Napoleon's fluffy defeat. He faced armies. He faced emperors. He marched across snow, desert, and fire. But the one opponent Napoleon Bonaparte could never conquer was a horde of rabbits. Yes, rabbits. This bizarre and true story takes place in 1807, shortly after the signing of the Treaty of Tilsit. Napoleon, now at the height of his power, decided to celebrate the diplomatic victory with something lighthearted, a rabbit hunt for himself and his top generals. His chief of staff, Alexander Berthier, was tasked with organizing the event. And organize it he did, lavishly. The plan was simple: bring hundreds of rabbits, release them into the fields, and let the emperor and his men enjoy a relaxing day of sport. But there was one tiny flaw in the plan. Instead of capturing wild rabbits, Berthier's team purchased tame, farm-raised rabbits, creatures that didn't know they were supposed to run. Instead, when released from their cages, they did something utterly unexpected. They charged. Hundreds of fluffy, well-fed bunnies began hopping directly toward the hunting party. At first, the men laughed. But the rabbits kept coming. Dozens turned into hundreds. They swarmed Napoleon's boots, crawled up his legs, and even jumped into the royal carriages. The emperor tried to shoo them away with his riding crop. His men waved flags, shouted, even fired pistols into the air. Nothing worked. The bunnies, perhaps thinking they were being fed, overwhelmed the greatest military mind of the age. One witness said it looked like a furry avalanche chasing down Europe's most feared conqueror. Eventually, Napoleon had to retreat to his carriage and flee the scene. Yes, Napoleon Bonaparte ran from rabbits. It sounds like satire. But this story is well documented in contemporary accounts and letters from officers present that day. And while it may not appear in most history textbooks, it has become one of the strangest and most beloved legends of Napoleon's life. But beyond the laughs, this tale also shows something important. Even the greatest figures in history are not immune to the absurd. For all his triumphs and titles, Napoleon was still human, occasionally unlucky, occasionally foolish, and sometimes hilariously outsmarted by rabbits. So next time someone talks about Napoleon's genius, remind them. Yes, but even he lost a battle once. To bunnies. And if you think that's surprising, just wait until you hear what Napoleon truly feared. It wasn't Russia. It wasn't revolution. It wasn't even betrayal. It was something much smaller. And it had claws. Stay with us, because the next secret reveals a side of Napoleon that will truly shock you. For Napoleon's secret fear: the eyes of the cat. He was fearless on the battlefield. He stared down kings, armies, and revolutions. But behind the steel of his stare, behind the legend of the emperor, hid a quiet, chilling fear. Napoleon Bonaparte was terrified of cats. It sounds almost ridiculous. A man who commanded thousands, reshaped continents, and crowned himself Emperor of the French, brought to unease by a creature so small, so common, so domestic? But history is full of contradictions. And this one is particularly fascinating. Multiple accounts from those close to Napoleon, servants, officers, and even his own family, suggest he suffered from ailurophobia, an intense and irrational fear of cats. He would reportedly become visibly distressed in the presence of a feline. In one famous anecdote, a cat entered a room during a military meeting. While others hardly noticed, Napoleon froze, visibly shaken, and demanded it be removed immediately. But why cats? Some historians believe the fear may have stemmed from an early childhood trauma. Corsica, where Napoleon was born, had many wild cats roaming freely. A scratch, a midnight fright, a haunting stare, perhaps one of these moments etched itself into the young boy's mind, growing into something deeper and darker with time. Others offer more symbolic explanations. In ancient Europe, cats, especially black ones, were often associated with witchcraft, mystery, and the unknown. For a man who craved control over everything, people, empires, even fate itself, cats represented something he could never tame. Think about it: dogs obey, horses serve, but cats watch. Their unblinking gaze, their silent movements, their refusal to bow, perhaps they unsettled Napoleon in a way no man ever could. It's also worth noting that Napoleon was obsessed with omens, signs, and superstitions. He once said, "A soldier should trust his luck above all." If cats were seen as harbingers of bad luck, it's possible he internalized that idea, feeding a fear that logic couldn't dispel. Whatever the reason, the image is unforgettable. The master of Europe, The terror of monarchs, unnerved by a soft purring presence in the corner of a room. But this secret fear makes him more human, doesn't it? Because if even Napoleon could be rattled by something as ordinary as a cat, maybe greatness isn't about being fearless. Maybe it's about pushing forward despite the fears that follow you, even if they wear fur. And as strange as this fear may seem, nothing compares to what happened one cold evening when Napoleon believed his time was over. In the final chapter of today's episode, we explore a moment of total despair, when the great emperor tried to end his own life. And what stopped him will surprise you. 5. The night Napoleon tried to end it all. We think of Napoleon as unstoppable. A man of ambition, brilliance, and relentless drive. But even legends have limits. And one cold night in 1814, in a dimly lit room in Fontainebleau, Napoleon Bonaparte tried to end his own life. After years of war, glory, and conquest, everything came crashing down. His Grande Armée had been shattered. Paris had fallen. His own marshals, men he had raised to power, turned against him. And worse, the people of France had lost faith. Napoleon, once the master of Europe, was now a defeated emperor, forced to abdicate his throne. He was offered exile to the small island of Elba. But to him, that wasn't exile. It was humiliation. The idea of living out his days powerless, watched, forgotten, was unbearable. So, in the quiet hours of April 12, 1814, Napoleon made a decision. He took out a small black pouch, something he had carried with him for years, just in case. Inside was a vial of poison he had obtained during his campaigns in Russia. He swallowed it, lay back, and waited to die. But death didn't come. Instead, the poison failed. Some say it had weakened with age. Others believe his body rejected it. What is certain is this. Instead of slipping away quietly, Napoleon spent the night in agony, clutching his stomach, violently ill. He didn't die. He survived. And when dawn broke, he rose, weak, humiliated, but alive. Historians have debated what this moment meant for years. Was it an act of cowardice? A final, desperate cry for control? Or was it the ultimate proof of his humanity, proof that even the greatest among us can break? Perhaps it was all of those things. But here's what matters, he came back. Just a year later, he would return from exile, land in France. And in just 20 days, reclaim power in what became known as the 100 Days. It was his final blaze of glory, a comeback so impossible, so bold, that it still defies belief. But it almost never happened. Because one night, in a moment of pain and despair, the emperor who once ruled a continent came seconds away from silence. And yet, he rose. That's the real secret behind Napoleon, not just his victories, but his resilience. His refusal to stay buried. His ability to rise from ruin, again and again. So when you think of Napoleon Bonaparte, don't just remember the battles or the crown. Remember the man who faced the darkest of nights and chose to rise with the dawn. Thanks for watching this special episode of Napoleon Footsteps. If you enjoyed these 5 hidden truths, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more untold stories from the life of the emperor. And let us know, which fact surprised you the most? Or do you know another secret that deserves to be in the next episode? Until next time, keep walking in the footsteps of greatness.